Hello, welcome to today's live broadcast, which is, fingers crossed, an interview with Tom Arnold, a Hollywood actor and also star and creator of a series from 2018 known as The Hunt for the Trump Tapes with Tom Arnold, in which Tom used his connections to Hollywood high-profile people to try to chase down outtakes from The Apprentice that would have helped expose Trump's active racism to the public to a greater degree than it's already in the arena. So hi, I've got some viewers turning in. I'll keep checking my messages on Twitter because, yes, did make a date with Tom, and it is New Year's Day, so I do appreciate that some people might struggle to rouse themselves to participate in a live interview, but I still hope that he'll turn up. In any case, I was excited for him to agree. It's been an exciting roller coaster of emotions to have a Hollywood actor agree to talk to me. And in any case, it's emboldened me to ask other people I can see via Twitter who ask both celebrities and active opponents of Trumpism. Hey, thanks for joining in. Hi, Caroline. Hi. So yes, I have also asked now an actress by the name of Tara Strong. I know her work very well because my children are quite young and they watch a lot of things that Tara does voice acting work for. So My Little Pony and Teen Titans, etc. Hi, Richard. Yes, it is very exciting. I will, actually what I should do is get the link ready. How's the volume, everybody? Is this good? Yes, Tara Strong. Oh, good. You know her. She's a fantastic voice actor, isn't she? And she is also derived from migrant grandparents and so has similar stories to me in that our understanding of fascist persecution or persecution due to religious subgroup stereotyping and scapegoating can lead to very negative outcomes for people and can push people out of their countries. So yes, Tara is also a great political activist, and I would imagine that's why she consented to talk with me. Because I'm not a Hollywood celebrity, but I am big on building a coalition to oppose escalating fascism from around the world. So as we know, the word conspiracy theory is often used in a derogatory fashion. You know, only uneducated people subscribe to conspiracy theories, and yet all of us who care about tackling climate change can say that there does appear to be now a global coalition of convenience in terms of concerted effort on the part of certain very powerful media owners, such as Rupert Murdoch and other people, and mining magnates as well, people who have a very strong vested interest in the status quo to oppose, not only oppose climate action, but to actively demonize the left and to demonize pluralism. That is to say, strong, democratic, multicultural societies. So it's sort of like learning that there are termites eating away at the foundations of our society, people that we might have assumed we could rely on to be pillars of our society, people who own media organizations that transmit news to us, and yet we are struggling because Fox News is so powerful and other things are so powerful in terms of indoctrinating people to believe Republicans when they say they're just going to cut taxes and streamline government, make everything more efficient. And instead what they tend to do is big transfers of wealth to the upper 0.1% and erode public services and white ant society by covertly supporting white nationalist organizations. At least that's what's happening under Trump. And then expecting everybody else to buy an explanation that Medicare and social services need to be cut in order to undo the massive $1 trillion that's been added to the deficit. Caroline's saying that legacy media are really going after indie media. Because independent media doing a better job of exposing some more of the corruption and purposeful misleading of the public? Yes. Are you like my white ant? They're white anting society. Yes. So more of us are waking up to that, but it does require a great deal of activism on the part of individuals to counteract the extremely powerful and prevalent effects of the status quo protectors. And we could easily think, oh, yes, well, we're part of the status quo. We should protect that as well. And that's the challenge for the left, in that the status quo, things as is, can stay the same only if we're prepared to embrace society burning as much as Australia is currently burning. So Australia is a really good example now to show the rest of the world. Yes, white people will also suffer. White people will also suffer if coal magnates are allowed to pursue their profit margins in an unfettered capacity, benefiting from ongoing massive public money subsidies. Our money being used to prop up industries that would otherwise be failing, rather than promote industries which would be a lifeline to us, like renewable energy industries, a lifeline to save us from a fate of essentially intensified natural disasters, such as bushfires, such as we're experiencing in Australia. And I do take call-ins, yes. But at the moment, I'm hoping that Tom Arnold will be calling in, so I might reserve my airspace for that at the moment. He promised to conduct an interview with me today. Richard's pointing out that it comes to human greed. Yes, some people are greedy, but the greedy people still need our acquiescence. And our acquiescence is kind of born of ignorance and passivity at the moment. I don't mean necessarily us individually. In a collective sense, I mean too much passivity, too much cowardice, but that's changing in terms of many young people are unwilling to sit by and allow the adults to continue to deceive themselves, each other, to allow politicians to deceive us as well about the extent and nature of the problem. So yes, climate change is not just what we see in front of us, but is the exponentially worse outcome when we've heated the world to such an extent that the world itself starts participating in climate change, and the world itself starts releasing carbon and methane gases as a consequence of thawed areas of land. Sure. No, sorry, nobody's welcome to call in and make the case for Bernie. You can continue to make comments. I wouldn't block you for advocating for Bernie. But I do see that as a cult of personality that makes people less motivated to engage with the facts about how the Kremlin supported Bernie Sanders' campaign in order to suppress the vote in 2016, and that pattern is likely to replicate itself, particularly if unaddressed. So I'm happy to devote time occasionally to talking about why I don't support Bernie Sanders. If I was American and he was the nominee, I would still vote for him because, yes, he's probably less criminal than Donald Trump. Nevertheless, I think there's some serious ethical problems with his behavior in 2016. Okay, so I'm still waiting for Tom. The rest of the world is learning the name of the Australian Prime Minister at the moment. It's Scott Morrison, and he was talking about how we can all relax and watch the cricket because this is just something that Australia has endured before, which isn't true. Australia has never endured fires to this extent and of this magnitude. Yes. Oh, I certainly am direct messaging Tom. I'll be like, hey, interview. Hey, Tom. He last messaged me yesterday about 3 hours earlier than this in the day and said, let's do this same time tomorrow, January the 1st. So yes, I'm still hoping. Maybe I'll send him a link to the live broadcast through Periscope. That would be one thing to do. How's the internet going? Okay. I feel like the connection's breaking up a little bit. Hang on. Okay. I feel like the connection's breaking up a little bit. Oop. Tom Arnold is awesome, and I'm really pleased that he was able to commit to having an interview with me. The connection's still perfect on your end. Okay, someone else has the connection breaking. Hang on, I'll ask my... I'm losing...
The phone's just there. The phone's just there.
Okay. That was kind of a... Okay, good. Yes, Astronomy Revisor, we are on the same side ultimately. You're probably in favor of democracy and of helping the pendulum of power swing back towards the working people, the wage earners of society, away from the 0.1% who are pursuing their profit margins in a very unethical manner, because they're doing it without care or thought for society, without care or thought for communities. Yes, so we're all interested in preserving American democracy. I think that's one very clear unifying goal. The thing about the left is they tend to contain more idealists, and the right tend to contain more conservatives who literally want to conserve society. So we want to improve society, and that is by nature a much more fragmented pursuit. So we all might have different ideas about goals and different ideas about how best to achieve that. The American middle class can thrive for a while, but it tends to take a little while for Republican economic policies to make their effects acknowledged widely. So Republicans repeatedly promise to people that they'll cut their taxes and revive the economy, etc., and reduce the deficit. But what do Republican presidents inevitably achieve? Massive increases in the deficit, and this is a pattern that's repeated itself over and over again. So people who still fall for that particular con are unfortunately not people who engage with reality easily. Their thinking is so colored perhaps by self-interest, very motivated thinking, to ignore that very clear and very repeated pattern, that it makes it difficult. Yes, so the American stock market is probably a little bit punch drunk. Trump is able to potentially emotionally manipulate the Fed, through tweets about how terrible the Fed is, to try and bend them to his will and increase the amount of money that the Fed is pumping into the stock market in order to conceal from the public the degree to which the economy is turning down, that multiple jobs have been, thousands upon thousands of manufacturing jobs have been lost specifically as a consequence of Trump's tariff wars. So yes, the Fed just borrowed an extra $1 trillion. All right, we'll continue to message Tom Arnold, but he may be having a little relax post New Year's Eve celebrations. In any case, I'll continue to hold him to his promise to be interviewed by me. I believe in his good heart, and I know how much work he's already put into marshalling public support and public understanding of Trump's criminality and his misconduct. So, yes, we are waiting for Tom Arnold. He may message me later and say, sorry, didn't get the time right or something. But in any case, we'll thank him for making the agreement in the first place. And maybe this will help generate more interest. And then when he does eventually turn up to the interview, that'll be good. And people will be more interested in joining in. And someone says, while you think we're a cult, I merely see Bernie as a champion of the working class. And yes, I wouldn't say everybody's in a cult. I'd just say that there were elements of cultism. That would be a better way to qualify my position on Bernie. So that's great that you want to have a champion for the working class. I can support and understand that. People have different approaches sometimes to how to achieve political aims. Some people favor incrementalism, and some people deride incrementalism as being just a secret way of sustaining the status quo with false hope and faint hope. Can we block the troll? Do I have any... Hunter Biden was legitimately employed by a Ukrainian gas company that admittedly was under investigation for a while for misconduct and corruption. But there was a corrupt prosecutor called Viktor Shokin who was refusing to investigate Burisma. And Joe Biden, together with large swathes of the international community, insisted that the government of Ukraine fire that corrupt prosecutor because of his failure to conduct appropriate investigations. So Joe Biden was able to do an above board, open condition of withholding US financial aid from Ukraine until that corrupt prosecutor was fired. As a consequence, Trump should not be able to use that particular above board corruption fighting measure, corruption fighting action on Joe Biden's part to try to undermine the campaign of his political rival and to try and undermine the case against his own rampant criminal behavior and rampant undermining of America's national security. So Trump tried to trade America's national security and trade his position as president and trade his illicit ability to circumvent the Impound Control Act of 1974 and withhold congressionally appointed funds from Ukraine. Those funds, $391 million, were appointed by Congress, which has the power of the purse, to advance America's national security by supporting their ally from an armed, ongoing military attack from Russia that continues to this day. So Ukraine is under attack from Russia and it needs America's support. Unfortunately, Republicans have stopped supporting Ukraine because they are all in with Trumpism and Trump's Kremlin backing. And the Kremlin want Ukraine. They want that land to build pipelines over, and they want the additional oil, fossil fuel resources that would be available to them, because Russia's smallish economy is largely driven by profits from fossil fuel industries. And Putin's personal wealth, which is estimated to be approximately $200 billion, is also driven by taking a share of the fossil fuel profits generated by his fellow mob-style oligarchs. So no, Congress has the power of the purse. That's part of the separation of powers as mandated by the US Constitution. Yes, so not only does a degenerate gangster run the White House, but a cult support him and prop him up in that position of power. But we can safely say that the tide has turned to a degree that 55% of polled American voters now say that Trump should not only be impeached, but he should be removed. And that's an excellent change of position. A plurality of voters in that way, a plurality of American adults, understanding the need to remove a corrupt president who is undermining the American economy, who is sabotaging American standards, who is serving his own self-interest at the expense of the national security of America and the economic stability of America. So yes, I'm not at all worried about Pence because Pence does not have the same cult following in the same way. He was a good prop to Trump because he helped bring along the support of evangelical Christians, which is a large portion of Trump's voting base and a very solid portion of Trump's voting base. But even now, evangelicals, the support for Trump is diminishing, particularly as more courageous Christian editors are coming forward to publish opinion pieces about how Trump is a criminal who needs to be removed from office, not just impeached, but removed. So yes, Donald Trump's support has not gone up. That is part of Kremlin tactics of gaslighting everybody to dishearten people who oppose Trump and embolden the weirdos who do support Trump, or the paid people who pretend to support Trump for clickbait dollars. Yes, I'm so sorry about your mum, Richard. Blessings to you, and anytime you want to pop in for an interview, I would absolutely be interested in that. I'm still leaving today free for Tom Arnold making an appearance, but what else can I do to help? What I can do maybe is I could try and just message him some more. I'll cut this and email it to myself. You can still see me while I do that, can't you? So I should continue talking even while I also try and do this. I'll take a little break from that. So yes, it's very important. It's very important to circulate real information about what happened with Trump in Ukraine. It's a pattern of behavior of Trump trying to cheat Americans of a free and fair elections, to rig elections in his favor. And I think a lot of people now understand that when Trump makes an accusation, he is usually exposing what he himself is guilty of. And so when he, in 2016, said it was likely that the election would be rigged against him, he was trying to stir up noise so that he could gracefully lose the election, or rather ungracefully lose the election, and then capitalize on all that disgruntled right-wing outrage and have viewers for a Trump television station. So he viewed the election as one large infomercial, but he had presumably also made deals with Vladimir Putin and with the Saudi Arabian royal family, possibly with Benjamin Netanyahu as well. And today, Trump's ally, Benjamin Netanyahu, is asking for immunity from criminal charges against him. So he's effectively declaring himself above the law. And that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I am supportive of Palestinians who would like to have a state and rights for their citizens that don't require them to be second-class citizens in a officially proclaimed ethno-state where if you're Jewish, you're an appropriate citizen of Israel. And if you're not Jewish, then you have next-level rights. So, yes. Yes. So what I would like for us all to do is still to consider ourselves to be deputies in spreading of factual information. So it's not just that we're here to promote one political candidate over another. We're here to practice articulating versions of reality, because every day there's a fire hose of misinformation out there trying to spread a false narrative. And a lot of the mainstream media is still passively complicit in promoting Trump for clicks and promoting a Trump worldview. So if the mainstream media is still acting as if Nancy Pelosi is breaking the rules by withholding articles of impeachment from a Senate vote, we need to be pushing back on that and pointing out that no, it is Mitch McConnell's misconduct in stating that he is allying himself with the defendant, that he will be coordinating with Trump lawyers and White House lawyers in the advent of any trial in the Senate, and that he won't permit witnesses. So he's like, oh, I'm just doing my partisan job. of delegitimizing this constitutional process of an impeachment and a trial in the Senate. Yes, so Australian Federal Police pointed out to the Australian government 30 years ago that Trump had ties to the mob, and therefore this should disqualify him from gaining a casino license or a license to build a casino in Australia. So 30 years ago, Trump was prevented from building a casino in Sydney, Australia, as a consequence of his mob connections. So we knew Trump was a mobster. I'm presuming many people in New York also understood that Trump was connected to the Italian and then to the Russian mob. But unfortunately, that understanding was not given adequate exposure and adequate airtime. So all of the scandals that Trump has been involved with for years were not adequately presented to the public. And certainly the head of CNN, Jeff Zucker, is a personal friend of Donald Trump's. So he not only benefits financially from Trump being in power, but he is helping out a friend by continuing to bring on Republicans who my 4-year-old is crying. I can hear her. Yes. So Trump for president used to be a joke. Yes, what the same was the case with Hitler. People derided him as a clown and incompetent. And once he was in power, people also began to say, people in the media were like, well, that hysteria over Mr. Hitler was overhyped, and hopefully people are now ashamed of themselves. He's clearly not all that bad. And we see a lot of similar commentary around Trump that's excused him and minimized his crimes and misconduct and presented his verbal logorrhea. Actually, no, that's when you write too much. Anyway, his verbal excesses as somehow logical presentation of ideas. Trump talks a little bit like in a word salad fashion, and his followers eat it up because they are still enjoying the surprise of his victory, the defeat of their enemies' expectations, because there's been too much of a warlike footing cultivated by right-wing media, where they despise Democrats. You see language on Twitter like eradicate Democrats. Eradicate communist Democrats is a hashtag I've seen on Twitter from right-wing people. And I don't want to respond in that same fashion. I don't want to respond as if we have to escalate war rhetoric from our part, but we do need to understand the degree to which they irrationally hate the left, and they irrationally hate more than half of America, and they irrationally hate pluralism. They hate the status quo. So even if conservatives have gotten away with pretending to have policies for the public good, even as they have basically operated as a front for various destructive lobby groups, such as the fossil fuel industries and the gun industries, the gun manufacturing industries, they have still been able to promote themselves as caring about American strength. And there are many people who will still vote for whoever seems the most alpha, without an understanding of policy, but with a firm commitment to saying we cherish America and we support everything about America. So we on the left have come to understand in a more visceral fashion over the last few years that they are driven in many instances by hate. And it's a projection when they say the left are full of hate. We would prefer improvement, but seeking improvement and being a little bit judgy about racism is not as condemnable as actively welcoming Kremlin intervention in American elections, actively saying that's fine if Putin helped Trump. That's fine if Donald Trump erodes the distinctions between the executive and the legislative branches. It's fine if he usurps power, if he wants to rule for multiple terms in direct contravention of the US Constitution. The people who support all of those, that flagrant flouting of American standards and American constitutional dictates, those people are driven by an irrational hatred of America and American standards. They think they hate the weak part of America and they just want to cast off weakness, but really they're running from the uncomfortable truth of climate change. and they're hoping that if climate change is real, that it only affects people of different skin color, and that they're strengthening their hand by advocating for walls, so that if people do try to flock to America because their own countries are being submerged underwater or on fire or ravaged by virulent diseases or crop failures, that America will hold firm. Whereas we know America is not immune to crop failures and natural disasters that have been exacerbated by climate change. We know that America is not immune to economic failure as a consequence of the out-of-control policies of an egomaniac who's all about playing alpha, but not about delivering for the American people. Yes, Tom is based in LA. Let's see if he said hello. No, he has not. He's running half an hour late, but as I've said before, New Year's Day, sometimes people struggle to wake up. We still do have a troll who is pushing Kremlin propaganda. So if anybody wants to block the account that says Irene Guillory, that's an interesting troll name. So how is everybody? How is your New Year's Day so far? Yes, it's 3:30 p.m. In Los Angeles, and I had organized with Tom for a 3 p.m. interview, but at the same time, he was a little bit vague on committing to that specific time, and maybe he'll surface later in the day. I'm not interested in Andrew Yang at present. Caroline, your New Year's Eve was spent choking on smoke, worrying about your family and fires. I'm very sorry to hear that. Too many people are in the same situation as you. Fires encroaching on so many Australian communities, and the world is talking about it too. But yes, you're living it. You're living with that toxicity of inhaling air full of smoke and pollutants that can stick to your lungs, that can cause coughing, that can endanger your life, and worrying all the time that your property and that your family might be in danger. No. You don't have to not say that. That's an important thing to talk about, Caroline. I'm big on bringing that up and talking about it because I want the rest of the world to understand that climate change isn't something that white industrialized societies can protect themselves on by ignoring it and pretending it's not there, and allowing wealthy people to continue to tie our hands and obstruct action taken to reduce the impact of climate change, or at least change the trajectory of emissions, because emissions are still rising worldwide and just bringing doom closer and closer towards all of us. So in Australia, a lot of people are literally tasting that type of doom at the moment. The smoke is thick on the air and in people's lungs. People are even seeing smoke haze in their homes, and that's happening to a lot of Australians. The sky is red the closer you are, and the sky's been grey for a lot of the rest of us as well. And now New Zealand is being blanketed by Australia's smoke as well. I have a good, hang on, I'm going to try and do one more thing. So bear with me, I'll keep talking about climate change, which is that 480 million animals are believed to have died in the fires. And so yeah, 500,000 animals perished. And what else? Yes, the Australian right are in power, and the Australian right have denied climate change and paid lip service to it, but sabotaged action. So left governments have instituted carbon processes that have been shown to have been effective in reducing carbon emissions. They gave business something direct to work with. That was called people derogatorily called it the carbon tax, but now people are more politely calling it the carbon exchange system, I think. It was just a free market system for encouraging businesses to reduce emissions, because there were penalties associated with higher carbon gas emissions. And when the right government got into power, on the back of the idea of repealing that, because it was sold by right-wing media as being a negative and as something that would increase people's electricity bills. Our left government were kicked out of power. We had a right government effectively installed by Rupert Murdoch, and they undid that system. So emissions have continued to rise since then. And even worse, they tell the world that Australia is doing enough and doesn't need to do any more. They minimise the significance of climate change, and they've sabotaged climate talks. Most recently, was it in November, the COP talks, because they were an example of an industrialised government not getting on board with making changes to modify our industry outputs. Not modifying legislation to help achieve climate gas reduction targets. So they white-anted the process of global cooperation to save the human race from runaway climate change. Oh, someone's breaking into your house. That's not right. Yes, so Rupert Murdoch kind of is a kingmaker in the UK, the US, and Australia. And it's good to talk about it because we do need to strengthen public opposition to having kingmakers in that way. Some people might not mind because they think Rupert Murdoch is on their side and they don't understand how he is cheerfully selling out our children, our grandchildren, and ourselves right now for his own interests, that he is not motivated by a pillar of society style, keep communists out of power. He might tell himself that, but he has pushed out people from power who were addressing climate change and put in power his friends who are friends with his media magnate friends, so that they can continue to have as many multi-million-dollar homes as they want, whilst people perish in bushfires and other people shelter in boats on lakes because their homes are threatened and their towns are burning to the ground. A farmer had to go back to his property and shot 20 of his cows because they were burning. Yes. Koalas were already functionally extinct a few weeks ago, but now they're probably pretty close to extinct. Fire is not affecting me other than just some coughing. My daughter had a bit of ash in her eye yesterday. And yes, about 14 dead, I think that's right. Yes, we have climate-denying evangelical Christians in power. That's our Prime Minister. I'm glad you enjoyed the scope. I know there's a lot of the fireworks might have potentially been paid for in advance. It was a very cringeworthy juxtaposition, sure, of having massive out-of-control bushfires in Australia and also having fireworks, literally with the word fire in it, so that volunteers might have had to do extra work in extinguishing fires triggered by the setting off of fireworks. Yes. Oh, Tom didn't give me his phone number. I've just been communicating with him by direct message. Maybe I should ask for his phone number, because then I can call him next time if we have an arrangement, so that I can alert him to it being the exact time of the interview. That's sweet. People are still sharing sharing this Periscope, even though the title is quite misleading at this point. There is no live Tom Arnold. Oh, I know what I can do. Go on Twitter on the laptop. So yes, other people in Australia, how are you? How are you experiencing fire at present? Well, so wait, Richard, are you saying you live in New York? I didn't know that. I thought you were living in Jamaica. Well, that's sweet. Brian says most of us are here to listen to you, not Tom. Well, I'm very grateful for your support and your continuing presence. So, yes, I would like to point out that if people gravitate towards alpha persons, and I'm not going to say alpha males because I think Maggie Thatcher in England was perceived to be an alpha female, and other female politicians have been elected around the world. So what qualities do we want to help associate with left or central politics to rehabilitate those political movements in the face of massive Kremlin propaganda campaigns and massive mining magnate propaganda campaigns to deceive people about the nature of left politics, that we want to advocate for the working class and we don't want to install communism. It's quite funny because in a tragic and ironic way, that the more the right has succeeded in dragging America to the extreme right and disempowering workers and empowering corporate executives at the expense of the working class. I sound a bit like a communist when I say that, but I'm not, because I'm not an advocate for government control of industry. I'm still an advocate for well-regulated capitalism. Just as I'm an advocate for well-regulated militias in America, I don't believe there should be such prevalence of gun ownership and semi-automatic weapon ownership that people should be at risk of being shot on a regular basis, that there should be so many thousands of gun deaths each year, that America should have a homicide rate that's 7 times the rate of other comparable industrialized wealthy nations. All as a consequence of this unnecessary pandering to powerful people. There's too much respect for wealth and power in the US, and people have lost that respect for the accomplishments of unions, for achieving 5-day working weeks, for achieving social service payments that had people pooling money and giving money to the government through taxes that were then to be returned directly to them as social security payments once they became old or encountered disability. The first union buster that Bob remembers was Reagan, when he fired all the air traffic controllers. Yes, I hear Ronald Reagan did a lot to push America towards the right and to undo the achievements of the left. And he didn't have a culture war to trade off at that point. Although, no, I guess he did. The culture war was between hippies and status quo preservationists. So we have to now try and reclaim that label and say we want to preserve the status quo, in that we want to preserve the existence of the human race. We want to preserve livable conditions. And Australia now makes very clear that climate change will not leave us with livable conditions. It's not leaving us with livable conditions. It's burning Australia up right now. And the government is so untethered from reality that it's still denying the extent of the crisis and refusing to ask for appropriate levels of international support. So, or it's refusing to bring in the army to the extent that the army could help. They could be converting army airplanes to water dropping airplanes, Hercules aircraft, I think. and they're refusing to rent water dropping aircraft from the US. They have some in the US that aren't being used because it's opposite season for you on the other side of the globe. And the government's refusing to do that because it doesn't fit in their narrative of pretending that climate change is not a big problem and pretending that these fires are just part of Australia's normal bushfire season. They're not normal. We've had escalating fires every year, but this is unprecedentedly dreadful. Yes, Canadian volunteers have come to Australia, but there is more help that Australia could be asking for, and there is more help that Australia could be receiving, except that our Prime Minister is lying to the public still about the extent of the crisis. Okay, so only I can block the OK Boomer troll. I don't have a great deal of tolerance for trolls. I don't want them to profit off my platform. So what I might do is, oh, you've muted OK Boomer. I'm going to try and get into the. Yes, he won't call a state of national emergency. So Holly thinks that water planes are not effective, although I heard differently. I heard that water planes can be useful. We have some, and we hire some at a great expense, but it is difficult, admittedly, to bring these fires under control because they are so massive. But Scott Morrison the Australian Prime Minister, was asked to meet with fire chiefs, and he refused. Former fire chiefs who wanted to warn him that conditions for this year looked to be in national crisis level terrible, that the level of drought, the dryness of the bush made it extra flammable, and that there were all these conditions in place to really destroy and upend not only the environment, but also the living environment for Australians. And now we have over 1,000 homes have been destroyed. It's approaching 1,173, I think, and approximately 14 people have died, and there'll be more. So volunteer firefighters have died. Gale force winds have overturned multi-ton trucks because the winds have been so strong. Fire winds have tipped trucks over, and firefighters have been killed in that way. And yes, the Australian Prime Minister went on holiday just before a firefighter died, but people were still dying at that point, and hundreds of homes had been destroyed at that point, that our Prime Minister still decided to go on holiday to Hawaii and relax there and breathe nicer air there and meet with his best friend, who is, would you believe, a massive QAnon figure on Twitter. And his other best friend has been under police investigation for 4 years for his involvement in covering up child sex assault crimes committed by his father against members of their enormous church. So that church is called Hillsong Church. The pastor is called Brian Houston. He's in a photo around Trump's desk, making a Q sign with his fingers, Brian Houston. So our Prime Minister has multiple friends who promote QAnon. So Brian Houston covertly does it by making finger signs when he's in a picture with Donald Trump at the White House. But Scott Morrison's other best friend is a QAnon person, has a QAnon account on Twitter with thousands upon thousands of followers, that he's spreading that type of conspiratorial bollocks to people that makes them, it gives them the energy to continue to ignore climate change and to continue to foster irrational hatred of working pro-worker politicians. So politicians who don't want to strip away benefits and protections from wage earners. Maybe I should say wage earners, and that'll make me sound like less of a communist, because sometimes people think workers just means blue-collar workers now, and they associate themselves with the wealthy, because technology's made a lot of people feel very wealthy. We're like those people who believed that the Titanic could never sink because they were so proud of the technology of that era, and it made them feel so potent and so powerful. Like, how could harm befall us? We're so good at things. And similarly, people now feel like we have iPhones and computers and clever people. How could we all run the risk of perishing from climate change, from food instability caused by climate change, etc.? How could that happen to us when we're so smart and we've achieved so much? It can still happen, and it is happening. And 26,000 people at least are dying each year of climate change, but that figure is certainly expanding, and we haven't paid enough attention to it because maybe the massive floods have been in Bangladesh. So it's been brown people, and our passive racism has led us to accept a media that didn't highlight these problems enough, and that didn't we allowed media to get away with pretending that climate change was up for debate and giving credence to the liars who position themselves as truth tellers about climate when they're just self-interested grifters who want to profit from lying to all of us and catering to our appetite for comforting lies. Yes, don't succumb to cynicism. That's always my message. Yes, what's happening to Germany is happening to us in America and Australia, but what's really important is to stay strong, stay mentally strong, and still continue to work towards building a coalition of people who understand the severity of the problems that we are facing and the way in which the fossil fuel oligarchs such as Putin, who benefits from fossil fuel profits, are deliberately sabotaging our ability as humans to deal with the problems that confront us. So, yes, there's massive heat waves happening in the ocean. So aquatic life is threatened. Crops are losing their nutritional value and losing their viability. So I think corn yields decreased by 10% in many places this year where climate change had increased the temperature. So increasing temperatures is threatening our ability to feed us, to obtain food in the future. So it feels fine now. Supermarkets are full. But listen, in areas in Australia, the power is out in supermarkets and people are bumping themselves, and it's a bit difficult. People are panicking and trying to obtain food supplies because they're being cut off from the rest of the world by fires blocking roads, fires trapping people, and fires burning people alive in their homes. So it's a really important time for the world to increase the amount of attention they pay to climate scientists as opposed to lying climate obstructionists. And that's my message each day and every day. And I hope to talk to Tom Arnold soon, not necessarily about climate change, but he's got a lot of friends. Oh, is it frozen? No. Yes, climate change is a problem that affects everyone, but it's often derided as being a fantasy promoted by the left. But I think 74% of Americans or American voters have agreed that climate change is a problem that politicians should do more to address. So the truth is getting through. We just need to build on it more and build on the sense of urgency that action does need to be taken. More action needs to be taken. We need to transition away from fossil fuels. Finland is doing it. We need to talk about places that are. Finland has set ambitious targets for being carbon neutral by 2030. Steve has one of those Malthusian points of view that just thinks starvation and floods will reduce the population to a sustainable number. That's a very white way of thinking about things because, yes, the people who die from starvation and floods first will be people of lesser developed economies. And so they will often be people with brown skin. But that's not acceptable. That's not what is stopping us from having a sustainable existence. It's consumption patterns in industrialized nations. So the lesser industrialized nations shouldn't be paying the price. We shouldn't just accept that as a happy corrective. It's not okay. yes, it's true that in Australia, if you don't vote, you get a fine. It's compulsory. And yes, that would be great, but it hasn't provided an inoculation against Murdoch propaganda. So we still have a conservative government. We still have a big swathe of the population that buys into the comforting lies sold by Rupert Murdoch and his associates, who also mass own various media sources. Look, I should probably go and spend time with my family now, but I will continue contacting Tom Arnold and trying to perhaps get his telephone number so that I can call him next time I'm anticipating his participation in an interview. And yes, Happy New Year to everyone. I'm glad you enjoyed the broadcast. I won't be back soon today because I'm going to be making a road trip for a little bit, a couple of hours at least, and then probably going out with my son and his friend for a play date. But I will stay in touch. And if Tom Arnold contacts me at any point today with availability, I'll try and use my phone on the run for a live broadcast using roaming data. So good luck to me, and thanks all for joining in today. Sorry about the slightly misleading title. I could talk to a sock puppet, Tom Arnold, but I won't do that because I don't wish to belittle the man. I still have hopes he'll turn up at some point, and whether today or tomorrow. And yeah, I'm grateful to talk to you all, for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you all and fight the good fight, as it were, not just against climate change obstructive politicians, but against our own natures and our own apathy. I'm here for overcoming entropy and apathy, and in favor of pro-social activity, pro-social awareness raising, and pro-social decision making. So we need to be talking about the difficult decisions we can make as individuals, and also the positive decisions we can make as individuals. It's fun supporting a candidate. It can be heartbreaking, but in the same way as people enjoy watching sports, I'm hoping that Kamala Harris gets to be Joe Biden's vice president pick. That would be awesome. It's interesting to pay attention to policy positions of Democratic candidates. There's certainly a lot of people in America who have changed their mind about Donald Trump. Veterans who saw it as a betrayal when he left behind the Kurdish fighters who had been co-combatants alongside of US troops for 5 years fighting ISIS in northeastern Syria. There's plenty of active military members who saw it as a betrayal when Trump pardoned Eddie Gallagher, the violent sociopathic murderer who shot at civilians and whose peers interfered with his rifle, changed the scope on his rifle so that he'd be less accurate when trying to shoot at and murder Iraqi civilians. As well as just stabbing a sedated captive and then posing with the body and holding, according to his Navy SEAL peers, an on-the-spot re-enlistment ceremony over the corpse of this captive who he'd just murdered in cold blood. So yes, Eddie Gallagher is very bad, and obviously his pardon undermines not only military discipline but also the world's understanding of American military codes of conduct, and how they seek to minimize harm and not just brutalize people and stab them. Yes, so I think there are actively serving people who have looked askance at Trump for his actions there. Anything that helps wake people up from a Fox News induced fact-free existence. Yes. Oh, new comments. Did I mispronounce Kamala? Kamala. It is family time. Thanks for reminding me. It's now been exactly 1 hour since I logged on, so I'll say goodbye. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and all the best. Talk to you soon. I appreciate that reminder. Kamala. I should watch more television. All I do is read. But if I heard things pronounced on TV, I'd have a better appreciation for how they're pronounced. So thanks, everyone. See you later, and take care. Bye, Richard. Call again another time, and let's make an arrangement via direct message to make a firm appointment for talking together. See you, everybody. Bye. Thank you.